Yeah, hello everybody. Welcome back. Let's go on with some remarks on the taxes on income. Here you see again the overview. Taxes on income, taxes on corporation, and trade tax are the most frequent taxes on income in Germany. Now, the main facts on the taxes on income. Well, the first is there is a catalog of types of income in section 2 ESDG. That means if something is not listed in that list, then it was not covered by income tax, then it will be free of income tax. For example, if you win in a lottery, if you get an inheritance, or some other strange and rather rare events, nearly all the other things are covered by the list. So there you should look up. In case of juridical person, the Corporation Tax Act refers to the same list rather indirectly because it says the computation of the income of the corporation tax has to be done according to the rules of the Income Tax Act as far as Corporation Tax Act does not demand something else. Well, the general idea of what is income must first be understood. Income is not property, but the increase of property. So the amount by which you got richer in comparison to last year. So everything which you get, which you didn't have before, so salary, wages, rent, income, pensions, license fees, all what's coming in is your income, the amount by which you have become richer. And now, as I already mentioned before, this general definition is far too unprecise to work with it in practice. And so Germany, like many other states, refrained from a general definition, but just set up a list of all the individual events or categories which can be regarded safely as income. So these 7 types of income are then looked throughout the whole year, and the results from every category are added up to one single total at the end of the year, and this is the total taxable income, and that will be your tax base for the year. So you are never taxed on individual events. The income tax just adds up everything which you got during a calendar year, and that is your tax base. So income tax is always paid for the whole calendar year and computed for the whole calendar year. Naturally, as the year of 2021 is at the moment going on, nobody of us can up to now really know his or her final income tax burden. So what we can make during the year is only prepayments based on estimates. After the year, then we have to make the final computation, or in Germany, it's still in the traditional way. We don't make the computation ourselves. We hand in a tax declaration where we list all our income, and then the fiscal office applies the legal rules to our information, computes our whole taxable income, and then our income tax, which is due for the calendar year of 2021. And then they compare with our prepayments. If we overpaid, then we get a refund of the overpaid amount. If we underpaid, then we get a nice tax notice which tells us how much money is still due to the fiscal office and until when we have to pay, usually within 1 month after we get that notice. Yeah. Facts which you also need to know about income tax. Why is not the individual event taxed? Well, the answer is simple. Income tax is something which is progressive. Progressive means that persons with a high income shall pay a high tax, but not only a high tax, but a high percentage of their income. And persons with a small income only pay a small percentage. So the income tax takes into account that people are rich or poor. And the idea is everybody has to contribute to the burdens of the public, but to the state expenses, but the poor pay less than the rich, and not only absolutely rich, but also relatively rich. A progressive tax is characterized by not only the tax goes up. That would, for example, also be the case if everybody pays 20% or 10%. Naturally, if I only have 1,000 euro, I pay 100. If I pay 100, if I have 100 million, I pay 10 million. But this is not progressive because the percentage of the tax would always be constant. A progressive tax is characterized by even the percentage, so the tax rate goes up, the more you get richer. The idea is if somebody is really, really poor and you take away 10% of that person, imagine you only have 1,000 euro which you can spend, then taking away 10% of that is really hurting you. You lose 100 euro. Probably now that means you renounce on Christmas, or the one and only cinema visit with your family is just gone. On the other hand, if somebody has some 100 million, then if that person pays 30% or 38%, that will no longer change the everyday life of that person. So the idea is for the rich, you can even demand a higher percentage so that the tax does not go up proportionately, but more higher. Yeah, so the rates in Germany go from 0% from people whose income is so low that they are below the subsistence level, so in plain words, who do not earn more than they need usually to survive, and lead a very poor, decent, humble life, and up to 45% for the persons who are rich or super rich. So there is a limit for the percentage. Naturally, you can't increase the percentage up to heaven. You can't go up to 100% or so. That wouldn't work. Now, how is payment of income tax done? As I told you, the final computation only happens after the end of the year. Before the end of the year, you don't have the knowledge to compute. So before you can make prepaids based on estimates, these estimates are sometimes, or these prepayments are sometimes regulated by law. Naturally, you need to do that because not everyone in the population is wise enough to put aside enough money for the tax or to take care to calculate a prepayment in an adequate way. So most of these things are regulated by law. For example, when you are employed, your employer has to calculate, according to legal rules, probably sufficient prepayment. The so-called wage tax is withheld from every wage payment or salary payment which you get. Your employer holds back a probably sufficient amount, exactly regulated by law, which is in most cases sufficient to pay for your expected annual income tax. That's called in German the Lohnsteuer, translated very often as wage tax. In UK, it would be called pay as you earn system. Well, many other countries have the same problem, that they need prepayments because the people otherwise would spend and waste the money. And so if many countries have the same problem, many countries will have a similar solution. Good. For people who receive certain income from capital, like dividends or interest, there is a standardized prepayment with 25% of the interest for dividend in Germany. That's called capital income tax, or in German Kapitalertragssteuer. And some other people, or all the others who are left over, like business persons who run their own business, or self-employed people, or people who have income from lease and rent. They have to make prepayments every 3 months, usually nearly at the end of a quarter of a year, so that you have 3 months of time to earn the prepayment and then to make it. Well, the catalog of the 7 types of income in German law is something one should perhaps know a bit about. It begins with income from agriculture and forestry, but has historical reasons. When German income tax was introduced in 1890 approximately, then agriculture was still the most widespread source of income, because then most of the population were either farmers or worked for farmers. So income from agriculture, um, so for this reason, opens the list. The second important thing was income from business. That is what everybody has who owns a business or owns a share in the business. The peculiarity is income from self-employment, because that is not what Englishmen or US citizens would regard as self-employed persons. It's only a very special case of self-employed people. Certain noble professions are called free professions, which in the Middle Ages were free from certain state regulations. Good examples are doctors, lawyers, artists, teachers, so the professions of the elite who could read and write in the Middle Ages. No city would ever have taxed them as business people, and so traditionally these had retained their special status, probably a kind of self-perception which impressed even the legislator in the 1890s. In principle, you can say everybody who is his or her own boss has a business, and specific cases of having a business are agriculture, so you end up then in type number 1, or you have a so-called free profession or a similar profession, then you end up in paragraph 18. So if a single person opens up a business and that single person says, I am now self-employed, but from the tax perspective, no, you are not. Probably you are not. If you just run a one-person business, you are somebody with income from business. Okay. The other categories then are income from employment, which most people have who have a job as an employee. Income from capital is if you give a loan to a bank, or deposit capital in a bank and get interest, or if you buy shares and get dividends. So you don't run a business yourself, you gave money to somebody else, and that you get some remuneration for lending or giving your money to the other person, and the other person pays you regularly remuneration for that. Lease and rent is the category of income for the people who have houses and let them to tenants, who own patent rights or rights from inventions, and grant others the right to use their invention in return for a royalty, a license fee, or some other things like that. And the 7th type of income is a curiosity. It's called other income. This is not what the name might suggest. It's not every other increase of your property. It's again a list of rather specific and rare sources of income. So the 7 types of income are in principle, or if you look on them properly, far more than 7 types of income because number 7 is again a list of approximately, I think, 10 or 11 minor things, among others, pensions, financial support received from a divorced spouse, remunerations which you get as a member of parliament, because some years ago somebody detected that a member of parliament naturally neither runs a business nor is employed, because that person is not bound by orders. So naturally it couldn't work for the political career of people if you are a member of parliament and then your voters find out that you are the only guy who does not pay taxes. So they were very keen on adding themselves on the list of other income, after naturally some polite pressure from others. Um, yeah, why is income tax with a progressive rate? We already touched that question. Um, the answer is, well, the impact on your everyday life which taxes cause is far different um, when you compare poor people and rich people. Just to remind you of that, imagine you have, let's say, 10,000 euro income, then you need approximately 9,800 to live. So imagine you have then 200 euro which you can freely dispose of and waste and enjoy during the year, and now you are taxed with 10%. Well, that would be 1,000. So you would already have less left than you need to survive. Or if one only taxed the 200 which you could waste, your disposable income, then you would have to give away 20 euro. And imagine the only free disposable money which you have during the year is 200 euro, then losing 20 is really a hard hit. Now, if you are a millionaire and have 10 million, then probably it does not change your everyday life. You will nearly not feel if you have 9 million left or only 8. I would rather suggest or suppose that if you have a problem, if you have any restrictions which you feel in everyday life, if you are a millionaire with 1 million net or 5 million net income, this is rather a self-inflicted problem. Probably you never have to think about a restaurant visit, be it McDonald's or be it a steakhouse of the higher category, with, I think, 5 million net. There is no restriction in everyday life. So if we reduce your income from 5 million net to 4.9 million net, you will not even feel that. That's rather in imagination. So that justifies progression in tax. And now the question is naturally, how must progressive tax be defined? And that's a problem again. So because a legislator never must push up the rates in a way that you earn more and your net income goes down. So what strictly is forbidden is an idea like, until you earn 10,000, the rate is 10%, and from 10,000 onwards, 20%. Because then you can easily show that if somebody earns 11,000, then that person would have to pay 20% and then goes out with a net income of 88, so less of a net income than you would have had with less income, so with 10,000. So you have to avoid that, because otherwise people were no longer willing to earn and work more, and then that would fire back. So you have to make a tariff or tax rules in a way that this effect never can happen, that if you earn more, your net income always goes up, so that people always have an incentive to work more. Naturally, then the state also gets a bit more, but never so much of a bit more that it's negative for you to work more. How can you do this? Plain and simple, you make different rates for different brackets of the income. So a tariff could look like this. The first 10,000 of your income, you pay nothing. The second, you 10,000 are paid with charged with 10%. The next slice of 10,000 causes 20%, then 30% of every additional euro, and so on. Let's say at 40% we stop. This would then mean for 35% your tax would be computed as follows: 0 for the first 10,000, 10% for the next 10,000, that is 1,000, 20% for the next 10,000, that's 2,000, and 30% for the exceeding 5,000 because they are in the 30% bracket. And if you add that all up, 4,500. This is how every progressive tax works. You see that sometimes openly in the legal text. I believe in England you really have an overview which bracket costs how much. Now, you might also simplify the work for the taxpayer and might directly put down a list which says the final result, for example, where you have an entry 35,000 costs 4.5. So you save your people a bit of calculation work. But the decisive thing in the way how we defined the tariff just now, an additional euro always pushes up your net income because the low tax rates for the first parts of your income never are revoked. And that makes sense. So in that case, we could then say there is a rate which you pay on the next euro. So at the end of your income for the next thing, that is called the marginal income tax. You can compute or find that by just comparing the increase of your income with the increase of your income tax. For example, if additional 10,000 euro cause an additional tax of 3,000 euro, then that would be 30%. So that would be the marginal income tax rate. Whereas you can also define or look at what you pay in the average. In that case, you just compare the total taxable income with the total income tax. In that case, 35,000 was my total taxable income, and the total income tax paid was 4.5. Then the average rate was far lower still, 12.85%. So in that case, the average income tax rate is naturally lower because you have the average defined as a mixture of a low rate in the beginning and a very high rate at the end. So the average must be somewhere in the middle. Average tax rate would be computed this way. For decisions, when you want to know how much will it bring if I earn a bit more, you naturally look to the marginal tax rate because that is what the change of income does for the change of your net income. And as I already told you, if one wants to simplify life for one's citizens, one can publish the tax tariff already in an aggregated form, which directly lists total income and the total tax, referring to that. Now, a German peculiarity is that the Germans always want to do things especially convincing. So the Germans naturally are a people which begins to think, if after the first bracket of 10,000, then immediately there is a brutal jump up from 10 to 20%. Isn't that unfair? Couldn't we slow down, or couldn't we make the brackets smaller and so the jumps smaller too? Now the next idea would be, okay, don't make brackets of 10,000 and leaps of 10%. Split them all up into 10 brackets, so brackets of 1,000, and then always a step of 1%. Now naturally, you have again the same effect. When it comes to 10,000, you pay 10%. Now, when you enter the 11,000 bracket, it jumps up by a complete percent from 10% to 11% on the next euro. Isn't that rather hard? So it's a typical German idea to ask a mathematician, can you make the brackets indefinitely low and small? And can you find a function by which then gradually and constantly for each individual euro, the tax rate slowly goes up so that we never have a kind of a leap from 1 to 2%, but that instead we have a slow, constant increase of the tax rate. That is regarded as fair, and that is only understood by mathematicians, Nobel Prize winners, and other people who are far, far away from the real world. The problem is with that nice, fair idea, the outcome was that everybody in Germany regards the income tax tariff no longer as something which one can understand, because it's now turned into a mathematical formula, and it gives the people the sheer horror, because nobody knows what it is. They all have heard the tax goes constantly up, the percentage goes up, and so everybody has very wrong ideas, usually horrifying ideas of how it really works. So if you want to understand how the German tax tariff works, imagine many, many small brackets, all €1 small, where then the tax percentage increases from, let's say, 10% to 10.01%, and the next euro 10.02%, but always only on the next euro of the bracket. So the idea was to smooth the increase of the percentages by making the brackets indefinitely small, and the effect was that was then transformed into a mathematical function which nearly nobody understands. For example, here you see the tariff functions, and if you never were very, very attentive during your mathematics lectures or lessons in school, then you have no chance. And if you attended these classes very thoroughly, then you still wonder why somebody does this to an average citizen. So in Germany, nobody is able to compute his own income tax burden. They all rely on computer programs, printed lists, and on the advice of tax advisors, and they all regard it as horrible. This is the typical German characteristic trait, that we always want to do things as exact as one can imagine, with the side effect that in reality it doesn't work anymore. Okay, if you look to the tariff, you find here, for example, a formula in the higher brackets where you have 42% of everything minus a deducting factor. And here also in the very high bracket, 45% on everything minus a certain amount. And naturally the question is, where does that amount come from? Here is the explanation. How does this amount come into play? Well, as the tariff function shows you 0% for a long while, then at 9,474, it leaps up to 14%, their tax paying begins, and there constantly the rate goes up until it ends at a constant percentage of 42%. That is constant for a long, long while, until you become to be super rich with, or rather rich, 274,000 euro per year. Then it leaps up again a bit to 45%, and then it stays indefinitely on 45%. Now, how can one compute, let's say, the tax for 60,000? In principle, you would have to calculate the tax for each individual bracket of €1 and add it up. then you will probably be finished after 3 years, and that is a bit complicated. So if you ask a mathematician, the mathematician makes a trick and says, well, take the 60,000, take 42% on 60,000. Then you say, oh, that's too simple but too much. Then mathematician says, okay, but it's easy. I see that this is always too much by this green area here. And this green area, I can compute how much that is too much. That is my mistake, which I make if I just calculate 42% and everything. And if I know the amount of my mistake, I just deduct it. And this is particularly convenient because when you have 80,000, you also calculate 42% on everything and deduct the mistake. And the mistake at 80,000 is the same as the mistake at 60,000. And at 100,000, it's still the same mistake. And that is why it is convenient just to have somebody computing the mistake once before the year begins. And so to say, in the whole bracket between 57,000 and 274,000, just take 42% and then deduct the correcting factor for the mistake. The same approach naturally works in the 45% tariff zone. Imagine you have 300,000 annual gross income. First, congratulations. Most of us dream of that, and the dream will never come true. But imagine that's your annual income. Then you can easily calculate this by 45% on everything. Now, somebody who knows the tariff says, but this is too much for the first part of the tariff. Yeah, and then you can say, okay, we give somebody the nice job to calculate the exact amount of the error which we make and then to deduct it. And the nice trick is, again, if that is once and for all computed, then you can do the same trick for every amount beyond the 274,000 threshold, because you can also say for 500,000, compute 45% and deduct the error. And the error is constant because the zone where you pay less than 45% is always the same. So the error is always the same, and that explains why you have these nice parts of the tariff here. By the way, you can, for example, if you look to these tariffs, understand why, if people just want to do training cases with you on German income tax, then you always find some unrealistically high incomes for the calendar year, because naturally a professor or so who wants to design a task which does not drive you into madness always will try to end up with an annual income beyond 60,000 or even in the range of 300,000, because if somebody lets you compute a task and the taxpayer's income ends up with 30,000, then you have to compute that nice tariff function in the middle there, and then you probably go mad, and then this would be a mathematics exercise and no longer a taxation exercise. So naturally, if you wonder why people in example cases very often have very high incomes, here is the solution. Your professors or teachers just want to be nice to you and want to spare you these complicated formula. Okay, that's again enough for today. Well, let's have a break. Here you see the break. And stop for today. And I hope to see you soon again for the next introductory details on the German tax system. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy your evening, your afternoon, or the whole day. That just depends on whenever you watch this video. And I hope you come back soon. Thanks for watching.